Okay, so today I'm going to be explaining the Federal Reserve System, also known as the Fed, and the monetary policy decisions they make to affect the economy and try to fix it in cases where it might need fixing. So to explain the banking system, there is the Federal Reserve System, or the Fed, and they have a dual mandate to achieve stable prices in the economy and to achieve maximum unemployment. And maximum unemployment doesn't mean no unemployment, because there's always going to be four types of unemployment, and those types are structural, which means that a certain type of job is just no longer demanded, and thus it goes, those people are become unemployed, such as AI or machines outperforming the humans that were doing tasks, and thus those people no longer have jobs. There's also frictional, which is a pretty good one, where that means people are in between jobs. They're trying to find jobs that'll benefit them more and where they can apply their specialties better, and that will be good for the economy and society. There's also seasonal, which is lifeguards only really will be in demand during the summer, so they might be unemployed unless they have a backup plan during winter, fall, or spring. And then the fourth type, which is the really bad type of unemployment, is called cyclical, which occurs when there's a demand deficiency, like a recession in an economy, and just that's like the bad type of unemployment. But with the other types of good, like the good unemployment, such as frictional, that will always exist in an economy pretty much, and so there might be a maximum employment, or the natural rate of unemployment, where that's like 5% unemployed, but that's the most that the economy can be stably employed at. So that might be like 5% of the labor force unemployed. And the labor force consists of like people actually looking for jobs, like and that are eligible to be in the labor force, and that can make the unemployment number a bit iffy at times. Okay, so now to explain the banking system itself. So you have the Fed at the center, and like around that you'll have like the U.S. Treasury, or Wells Fargo, First Bank, just general banks that people and companies will go to and work with. So the Fed interacts with these by with these banks either selling bonds to the Fed in exchange for cash, or the Fed will sell bonds in exchange for cash. So if the Fed is buying bonds, that is putting liquid cash into the economy, and thus it speeds it up. Whereas if the Fed starts to sell bonds, that's taking money out of the economy, because the banks now have the bonds, which is a less liquid form of money, and the Fed has the actual liquid money. So this buying and selling of bonds and cash by the Fed is one of three ways that the Fed can affect the money supply. So again, if they're buying bonds, putting money into the economy, they're speeding it up. If they sell bonds, they're taking money out, they're slowing it down. And what this also does is it affects the federal funds rate, which is the rate at which banks will loan money to each other So like if the Fed buys bonds, they put their money into the economy, banks are more likely to make loans at lower interest rates to other banks. So that lowers the federal funds rate, which again is the rate at which banks charge for loans between each other. The Fed can also speed up or slow down the economy by changing what is known as the discount rate, which is the rate between a bank and the Fed for loans. And this rate is often higher than the federal funds rate, is because the Fed would prefer banks to go between each other rather than going straight to the Fed. But if they lower the discount rate, then that will speed up the economy as cash is more easily accessible by these banks. Or if they want to slow down the economy, like if you're in an inflationary gap, they'll increase the discount rate to slow down the accessibility of money and slow down the economy. The third way that the Fed can affect the money supply in an economy is by changing what's known as the discount rate. So a reserve rate. So what that is these banks have to hold a certain percentage of money that is deposited into them until it is requested, or they have to hold a certain rate so that if a person wants to go get some of their money out, they're able to withdraw it and the bank isn't left totally dry and scrounging for funds to give money to people. And what this allows banks to do is loan out the rest of that money to other banks or people. So, for instance, let's say the reserve rate is 10%. If a person were to deposit $100 into a bank, the bank would have to keep that $10 on hand, but they could loan out $90. So what this does is a very interesting thing where money will, through loans, so let's say a person puts the 100 into this bank, and they loan it out to someone else, and that person sells something to another person, and then that person puts it into a bank, and that bank lends money out to another person, and so on and so forth. That percent of money that amount of money exchanging will decrease over time, but that isn't just the $100 you started out with. So this is something called the multiplier effect, where if you take the reserve ratio, you find the reciprocal, so 1 over 10 for 10%. The reciprocal is 10. So if you multiply that by 100, you get 1,000. So by putting $100 into the bank, you're essentially creating $1,000 of money, but also $1,000 of debt, because these are loans. So while the bank may have to hold $10, they can loan out 90, and then a person can deposit 90 into their bank, and then that bank can loan out 81 to another person, and then that person might buy something, and then the person they buy that something from can put that into their bank, and so on and so forth. And thus money is created into an economy, and also debt, but that creates movement within the economy. And so if the Fed wants to slow down the economy, they might want to raise the reserve rate. So if they were making like 20%, that's 1/5, or the reciprocal of 5 times 100 equals only $500. But if they wanted to speed up the economy, they could lower this so that, like, if it were 5%, that's 1/20th, and the reciprocal of that is 20 times 100 equals $2,000 in the economy, which is higher than the $1,000 you start with. So the Fed can also do that to affect the money supply and try to either speed up or slow down the economy. So let's look at this from a recessionary and inflationary after this point of view. So if the economy is in a recession, they're under maximum capacity, under higher rate of unemployment than the natural rate of unemployment. That means that they are inside the production possibility curve. That also means with the long run aggregate supply and then the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, they're at a lower rate of unemployment and at a lower price, or at there's intercession, so they're underproducing. Then with the Phillips curve, that means that they have a high rate of unemployment. That also means that they're at a lower inflation rate. And then there's also a new graph called the money supply. And on that x-axis, there's the supply money, and on the y-axis, there's the nominal interest rates. So the supply money is perfectly inelastic because it's totally controlled by the Fed. And then the demand is downward sloping because as interest rates decrease, money is more demanded, and as interest rates increase, prices increase, demand is lower. So demand is higher with lower interest rates, and demand is lower with higher interest rates. Demand is higher with lower interest rates, demand is lower with higher interest rates. Okay. So the Fed is going to want to affect this money supply. And so to do that, the Fed could either buy bonds, or for this case, they're in a recession, so they'd want to either buy bonds, lower the discount rate, or lower the reserve ratio. And if you're wondering about federal funds, again, that is affected when they buy bonds. So if more bonds are bought, then the federal funds rate is going to decrease. That's also stimulating the economy. So what this is going to do, it's going to increase the money supply in the economy. So that'll shift everything back to long-run equilibrium. And another thing is, just a nice thing to note is that if supply is shifting, if aggregate supply is shifting, then the short-run Phillips curve will shift. But since demand is shifting with the money supply and everything, that just shifts the point on the short-run Phillips curve. So, with this recessionary gap, the Fed either buys bonds, lowers the discount rate, or lowers the reserve rate, and that puts cash into the economy. It stimulates it, increasing the supply, and shifts everything again back to long-run equilibrium. So let's have a look at how this might look with an inflationary gap. Again, this is a recessionary gap, and what just happened was expansionary monetary policy. Okay, now let's have a look at contractionary monetary policy, which occurs during an inflationary gap. I apologize for my writing, but okay, so we have the production possibility curve. You're overproducing than what you should be able to. Long run aggregate demand and aggregate supply. And aggregate demand, or not long run aggregate demand, long run aggregate supply, and aggregate supply. You're producing outside of where you can. The Phillips curve and the short run Phillips curve, and then the money market. So it's hard for me to be able to show this clearly on this level or this size of a board. So I'll just say like the axes. So this could be just a combination of goods. It could be like capital or consumer goods. The y-axis for the aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve is price level. The x-axis is real GDP. The y-axis for the Phillips curve is inflation, and the x-axis is unemployment rate, and then again the y-axis for the money supply, money market, the market for money is nominal interest rates, and then the x-axis is the quantity of money in the market. So to affect this, the Fed might want to sell bonds, raise the reserve rate, or raise the discount rate. So what this will do is it'll shift supply of money left, because you're taking liquid money out of it, you're slowing down the economy. And then up here you're going to be in a inflationary gap, so you're going to have lower and unstable unemployment and higher inflation, because you're in an inflationary gap. But once this supply is lowered, that's going to shift the Phillips curve back to long run equilibrium. At this point, it's going to shift the aggregate demand, aggregate supply curve back to long run equilibrium, and it's going to shift the production possibility curve back to long run equilibrium as well. So that's how the Fed and how it works can affect the economy in certain ways in order to correct it and get back to long run equilibrium within the economy. So I hope that was educational. I hope you're able to learn from this, and thanks for watching.